And welcome to First Strike right here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to talk about all things UFC Fight Night. Lewis against Daukaus should be a pretty good one here in Las Vegas at UFC Apex. Of course, a pretty good card when you have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on the undercard here, or as the co-main event, if you will, against Belal Muhammad. We'll get into that fight as well over the next hour. Of course, Lou Finocchiaro is going to join us. Jordan Sherwood and Reed Kuhn will have their expert analysis. But I start off today, which I like to start off each show with, Nick Kalikas right here, the man that sets those numbers behind us that you see on the big screen here at Circa Sportsbook. Nick, it's great. You know, we always joke about the UFC never really stops, right? And so we have this great card that we had last week with UFC 269, and they followed up with a really good sneaky card after having that pay-per-view, the last one of 2021. Very quickly, let's look back. How did the books make out last week with the handicapping?
What a wild card it was, man. I'll tell you what, we got crushed early on. Of course, I hinted that we were heavy on Muniz over Anders, right? So all the sharps that were on that side cashed in huge, but we got him back towards the end because it ended up being a good night. Of course, the two underdogs hitting in the championship fights helped significantly, busted up a lot of parlays. Mm-hmm. So overall, it was a very successful event for us.
Yeah, the shocker of shockers, of course, is what we saw in the co-main event there with Amanda Nunes losing her title to Juliana Pena. Again, I saw as late as closing time here before it got up to plus 775. So, Nick, I got to think, boy, the money was just coming in on the Lioness.
Yeah, and especially, like I said, parlay liability was outrageous. So, I mean, we cashed it in because the parlays got busted more than anything else. But, yeah, there was money coming in on the favorite for sure. I mean, it was the virtual lock for everybody, right? Everybody's like, there's no way. How is she losing, right?
Until she lost.
Until she lost, exactly.
Let's talk about this weekend's fight here at UFC Apex tomorrow night, right here in Las Vegas. And Derrick Lewis, the Black Beast, back in there against Chris Daukaus. And again, you look up, and for the novice fans can say, oh, Derrick Lewis is getting money. Plus money here for the knockout king in the heavyweight division here, plus 125. For those that don't know about Daukaus, yeah, pretty darn skilled heavyweight that you're going to see in there against Derrick Lewis. Is that why you guys set that number where you did? And I feel like he's getting some of the money.
Well, I think there's two different scenarios here, meaning that obviously what you just touched on, Lewis is the extremely established veteran. He's been in there with the best of the best, of course, a title contender. Now he's kind of in a gatekeeper type of role.
Yes.
And Daukaus is the one on the climb, on the rise. He's been impressive. I think a lot of people realize that he is the better mixed martial artist overall. But the power on the other side with Lewis and that experience, if he doesn't take him to the floor and if he decides to kind of strike with him, he could be in some serious trouble. So that's why it's competitive right now.
30 pounds, the difference here with Derrick Lewis, a very big man, obviously, in that octagon, got that one-punch knockout power. Do you think you'll see it's very interesting because, Nick, what I did see last week when I was watching UFC 269, and I follow you on Twitter as everybody should, Nick, is that you did some in-game stuff that I think now is starting to really pick up, where people are starting to watch some of these fights, how they play out, and then try to find some of those numbers. How is the in-game opportunity now for the bettors out there?
Well, I mean, for the pay-per-view cards, we try to pull up the whole card, right? The 5 fights that are on the main card for sure. Now, in events like this, the Fight Night events, we put up at least the main event or possibly the co-main and main event. If we could fill out the entire card, depending on our risk room and what kind of size, as far as the slate goes for the day, if it's college basketball, college football, whatever the case may be. So if it trims down, we have the opportunity to add more fights. But you're right, it is getting very popular. And live betting is awesome, man. I mean, there's so many advantages you could take. The lines end up getting crazy at times, right? So, yeah, I mean, we just saw even after the first round of the Pena and Nunes fight.
It went up even higher.
Yeah, it went up even higher, correct, because she won that one round clearly, of course. And then by the second round, what a different picture it was, right? So those are the type of liabilities and stuff you could take advantage of.
And, Nick, how do you try to chart that? Because, again, it's still relatively new, certainly in the MMA space here. How do you try to get those up? And people got to be really active, and literally you've got a minute in between rounds to get those wagers in.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as obviously the round comes to an end, we try to get them up as fast as possible. And again, during like commercial breaks or break time, of course, as you said, between rounds is when people can bet it. So again, up on the counter, people have to have their app ready.
Yeah, you got to be ready to go.
Yeah, so you got to kind of take advantage and understand the scenario and get your bets in quick as possible.
Okay, we talked about certainly in the main event here at UFC Apex with Derrick Lewis being the name commodity here. Wonderboy Thompson is a very popular fighter. If you've ever talked to Stephen Thompson, I know that you have, and I have many times. He's just a likable guy, right? He's a very likable guy here in the Wonderboy. And again, a guy that's been so close to getting those title shots here, trying to reascend and make another run at a title here. Big favorite here, minus 220 against, remember the name, Belal Muhammad from my former city in Chicago. What do you make of this matchup here with the numbers, and how have you seen the money come in?
Early on, it was Stephen Thompson money. Now, as we get closer, we have seen some sharp action on Muhammad coming in. Again, the scenario, like Thompson has had that kind of rise to the top, right? He was in title contention, of course. He was razor close to getting that title, getting that strap, especially in the Woodley fights, right? I mean, those fights were extremely competitive. So he's kind of been at the top. Now we're seeing Muhammad kind of excel towards that direction. So this is a big fight for him. It's almost like the Daukaus Lewis fight, right? If Muhammad could get over this hump of Stephen Thompson, then he's on his way towards a title shot for sure. But Thompson is the best striker we've seen in that division by far. He's such an elite level striker. And if Muhammad can't take this fight to the floor or knock Thompson out, he's probably not going to win the scorecards.
I'm right there with you. That's the pathway to victory that you have to see from Muhammad. You got to think that he gets this fight down to the ground if he's going to be a live underdog here at plus 180. I saw that the over-under props, a lot of them were around 2.5, obviously for a 3-round non-title fight here. Are you seeing any action come in on the possible early stoppage?
A little bit on the over, because I think people are realizing the durability. I mean, even Thompson in his last fight, I mean, he fought Gilbert Burns, which just fought for the title not too long ago, right? And his ground game is spectacular. I mean, if you get on the ground with Gilbert Burns, you're in a lot of trouble. Thompson was able to survive it. I mean, it was kind of a surprise that he kept on getting taken down like he did, but not getting submitted by a guy like that is extremely impressive. So I don't think Muhammad can submit him, and if you can't KO him, it probably does hit the card.
Yeah, that's the way I kind of read that as well. So again, you just saw the fight script there, and you see it reflected in the numbers where it's juiced heavily to the over at minus 290 for that over of 2.5 rounds, because again, you just don't think Muhammad could get the early stoppage here. If you're going to get a stoppage, you would assume it's Thompson with the length, using the kickboxing skills that he has to possibly get Bilal out of there, if not probably likely headed to a decision. Let's talk about Amanda Lemos again against Angela Hill here. Angela Hill is a thrilling fighter to watch, right? We know she's going to be always action-packed, but she's the sizable underdog in this one. How have you seen the money come in? Because you look at Lemos here, 10-1-1. She's really feels like a fast tracker here in her division.
Exactly that. Again, it's kind of the theme of this card, right? You got kind of the established veterans that face great competition against the new era,
the new blood.
Yeah, the new blood, of course. So Lemos has been very impressive, man. I mean, she has that finishing ability on the ground or on the feet. So she is the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. But we have seen the action come in towards Hill. A lot of people realize what you got in Hill. I mean, she's been in there with great competition. She's always in a tight, close, competitive fight, it seems, as well. And the trust factor is a little bit more towards Hill, too, right? I mean, like I said, she's been in there with quality competition. You know how she's going to perform in deep waters. And Lemos, there's still a few question marks here and there, right? But she is a rightful favorite because, man, she's looked fantastic.
It's a great point, though, Nick, because a lot of these fights, I think for the question marks that you might have for some of the favorites that you've already touched upon is experience, right? Or lack thereof against those established names that we've seen. So, again, a lot of times you go, boy, are they ready for this step up in class? Those answers, those questions will be answered on Saturday. Let's talk about Rafael Sunsao here against Ricky Simon. And again, a very similar thing. You look at Ricky, boy, what an exciting fighter he is to watch. And Sunsao, some might remember the Cody Garbrandt knockout at the bell. Maybe that's still the lasting image here, as he's now plus 220. So again, you get the guy that's been there, wars, been there, done that, against the fast tracker here in Simon. Any money coming in on Sunsao?
Yeah, a little bit. Again, this is the type of fight where the line is so high. You got to respect Sunsao. He's been one of the best bantamweights, I mean, historically in the UFC. So I think he's kind of flying under the radar there. He's got all the skill in the world. Of course, that knockout, like you said, against Garbrandt is kind of sitting fresh in people's minds. But in this spot here, Simon isn't really well known for that knockout power, right? So this should be a pretty competitive fight because these guys are extremely well-rounded. But Simon should be the rightful favorite. Again, I think he's got less wear and tear. I mean, coming off that brutal knockout, like we said, with the Sunsao, I mean, we'll see how it performs here. But I think he is fortunate that he's not kind of facing another guy with that crazy knockout power. Should be an exciting fight.
And Nick, this is an interesting one on the total here for the rounds, because you see 2.5 juiced heavily to the over at 195. But because of what we just kind of talked about here, and knowing how action-packed this fight is going to be, do you think you might see some late money come in on the under? Because again, it feels like if you possibly going to get a stoppage in a lower weight class, this might be the fight that happens.
Yeah, I think so. I would much rather bet the dog money on the under than the over, because all it takes is one shot. Again, even though we're saying that Simon doesn't have that kind of crazy knockout power, his chin has been wobbled. He's been rocked before, too. And Sunsao does have knockout power. I mean, there's no question about that. He's proven it time and time again, too. So, yeah, I think this is kind of one of those fights that you're saying kind of could sleep on the under more so than the over.
When you look at Ferreira against Gamrot here, and Gamrot right now minus 180, and you look at Diego getting comeback here at plus 155. Again, this feels like the first fight that maybe people they don't really know these fighters as well. How are you seeing this line move happen, and what type of money you're seeing happen on it?
Again, we're getting two-way early action, but as we get closer to fight time, we're seeing a little bit more money come in on Gamrot as a favorite here too. Fajeda, I think, man, he's such a good fighter. He's so close to get to that title shot because of the skills he possesses. I mean, on the feet, the guy can knock you out, obviously, and on the ground, you're in some serious trouble. But in his last fight, he kind of had a letdown spot again against quality competition, of course, but the way that fight kind of played out, I think it's sitting fresh in people's minds as well. And on the other side of it, Gamrot's been red hot, man. He's looked great. So it is another one of those scenarios where I think the established veteran in Fajeda, which is extremely dangerous in this spot, probably isn't going to get as much respect as he deserves because of the recency bias we're seeing for Gamrot.
The two veterans that I just can't wait to see slug it out again, of course, is Cub Swanson against the damage. Darren Elkins here. And Elkins right now, the comeback is about plus 160. Cub, a solid favorite here at minus 190. Two veterans of the sport. Cub, obviously, probably a higher acclaim, if you will, in his overall career. But both these guys, now you're looking at 38 and 37-year-olds that just like to bang. What do you make of this number?
Yeah, this is fantastic because, again, it's not kind of playing into that scenario where we said, because these are two established veterans, two guys that bring it each time out. We are seeing sharp action come in on the underdog, though. So, I mean, it's one of those scenarios I think that it's kind of tough to trust Cub, and then it's always, obviously, really difficult to bet against a guy like Elkins because he brings it. You know he's going to be in your face the whole time. And again, he's got some finishing ability as well. So we are seeing the sharp action come in on the underdog there.
About 20 seconds to go here. UFC on the line on UFC Fight Pass. It looks like it's getting rave reviews.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's a fun show. Of course, we give our best bets out. And again, mainly on the pay-per-view cards, but we are mixing in some fight night cards. And we did some social media for this event as well. So hopefully in 2022, we might do an uptick in shows. But make sure you tune in to UFC Fight Pass.
Nick Kalikas always does a great job here in every fight week. Come on back. Lou Finocchiaro is next right here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Back here on First Strike on VSiN, I am Dave Ross. It is always a pleasure each and every week to have Lou Finocchiaro join us right here on First Strike. Of course, you got to follow him on Twitter as I do, @GamBlue. And he's a very good podcast called the BOUT Business Podcast. Lou, welcome back to the program. Let's talk about the pod very quickly here. When people listen, what exactly are you giving them besides just winners?
Well, that's what we're hoping to give them, Dave. Basically, what the podcast is a 16-minute synopsis of my final releases each week that there is a UFC card. It drops Friday afternoon. Those that are interested can pick it up on any platform. And again, it's just final releases. And what we do with final releases is tabulate them and accrue them week to week, monitor profitability for our listeners and readers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's all about, the BOUT Business Podcast. So let's try to give out some of those winners this week. And let's start right to the main event here. Look, UFC 269 was scintillating just a week ago. You take a deep breath and boom, we got another really sneaky good card on tap this weekend at UFC Apex. The Black Beast back in action here, getting plus money at plus 125 against Chris Daukaus here, weighing the minus 145. Lou, I know you like to find those plus prices here. I hate this. I can't believe I'm saying this. Is the Beast a live dog at plus 125?
I think, Dave, he has to be regarded as such. If we take into account his body of work and who he's been in with, he's a pedigreed top 7 heavyweight in the UFC. So for that reason, yes. Why we may not is because he's very singularly dimensioned. While he's athletic and explosive, that athleticism and power and explosion only lasts a certain amount of time, after which time he becomes a little bit telegraphing, premeditated, and slow. Daukaus, on the other hand, kind of a newbie in the division. He weighed in at 235 and a half today, the heaviest he's been in his UFC career, probably for a reason, because he's in with a 265-pound Derrick Lewis. Should be a great fight. Daukaus needs to keep distance, use athleticism and IQ in order to keep this thing manageable for him. He does not want to taste any of Lewis's power, especially early. What I do know is that in heavyweight fights, 57 58% of heavyweight fights make it past a round and a half. And I like this fight to go over a round and a half because I believe Daukaus's athleticism and IQ will prevent him from standing toe-to-toe early with Derrick Lewis.
And it's an excellent handicap. I'm with you on that. I've played the over here at 1.5 rounds for that very reason. And also, Lou, as you know, when you watch Derrick Lewis fight, he's not a rush-in guy, right? He's not going to chase Daukaus all around the small octagon. He kind of waits. I remember specifically with the Curtis Blades fight here where Blades easily won that first round, and he just waited for Blades to make a mistake. Do you think that's what Lewis, if you want to back the dog for those people out there, is that the idea in a 5-round fight? That I'm just going to, all I need is one mistake by the relative newbie here in Daukaus to make one, and then I capitalize? Because to me, Lewis doesn't feel like a volume guy by any stretch of the imagination, right, Lou?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially early, he'll pace himself early because he knows he has a long fight. However, he was overwhelmed against Gagne. Daukaus isn't Gagne, but he can move and fight like him. So I think to answer your question best, I think Lewis is relegated to the one-trick power punch. He's landed it over and over again to other opponents. This opponent must make sure he doesn't.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I do think that's why the over is a really smart play, even though it is juiced to the over here at -130. Let's talk about a fight that's very interesting. Raquel Pennington once fought for the title. She is now a sizable favorite here at -170 against Macy Chiasson, who missed weight. And Lou, what I'm always fascinated, because I know you watch these very, very closely, what do you make of that? She missed it by 2.5 pounds here, Lou. What do you make of that now weight advantage that Chiasson will have?
I think that's exactly how you have to look at it, Dave. It is an advantage. When a wrestler misses weight, they're doing it to help their takedown abilities. When someone who's fighting a wrestler misses weight, it helps them defend said takedown opportunities. The key to this fight is that both of these ladies fight at 135, and because Pennington's scheduled to fight another girl, had the other lady, Avila, pull out of the fight, Chiasson moves in on short notice. They agree to fight at 145 pounds. Chiasson is a huge woman for 135. She's 5'11", and she towers over Pennington. She'll have 4 inches of height. She'll have 5 inches of reach, arm and legs. She must keep it up and standing, and the big cage is going to help her. And as Pennington tries to move inside, I think she's going to be susceptible to Chiasson's length, her knees, her striking. I think it's a real bad spot for Pennington. I like Macy Chiasson quite a bit here.
You know, Lou, it's fascinating because I think a lot of people out there, they don't want to back the person that didn't make weight. But in your handicap, you take Pride and Prejudice out of this thing, and let's call it what it is. This is a huge advantage that, again, until the rules are changed, now we know she's going to give up some of her purse here to Raquel Pennington, but to your point, this now becomes a decided advantage, even though we don't like the fact that she missed weight.
The one thing that I'll give Chiasson credit for is that she came out and weighed in late into the process. It was at 11:40, so with 20 minutes left. So she tried cutting the weight. When they come in the first 10 or 15 minutes and miss weight by 3 or 4 pounds, they're outright cheating. I don't think Chiasson's doing this. I think that the short notice nature of this fight was such that she didn't have time to cut, and the fight is still on. So I think all parties agreed, but it is a huge advantage.
I love the fact that you put some nuance into that conversation for those blindly out there going to go, oh my goodness, she missed weight. They should not have the fight. I think that is a nuanced conversation. I'm glad that you had it there. Let's talk about the co-main event here. And Lou, this is a fascinating one for me. Obviously, you know, you love the Wonder Boy. He's one of the fan favorites in the UFC. Bilal Muhammad, a pretty darn good guy himself. I tweeted at those guys and I said, I hate when you have good guys fighting each other. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to lose here. Wonder Boy right now, -220. And Bilal, remember the name, the comeback right now, +180. Is this too big a favorite for the Wonder Boy, or do you think this is priced properly?
I think the Wonder Boy should be a favorite, but we are getting into premium pricing where Bilal Muhammad is beginning to get into the raise an eyebrow category. Listen, we found out from Gil Burns that a wrestling heavy attack can be kryptonite to Wonder Boy. And that's exactly the kind of fight that Bilal Muhammad brings into this fight. The issue is Bilal Muhammad on the caliber of Gil Burns? And we have yet to really see that. I don't know that he is. This is a great fight for me to talk all the way around, but I think that the key to Muhammad will be getting this fight to the floor if he can do it. The key for Thompson at 38 years old, 5 years older than Muhammad, keep it standing, keep Muhammad on the outside, pitter-patter him with volume, and try and get out of here with a decision.
You know, it's so fascinating to me, Lou, is my visuals say that Bilal Muhammad is such the smaller guy to the Wonder Boys giving away 3 inches in the reach advantage, but really there's only 1 inch in the height disadvantage for Bilal. That kind of stunned me a little bit because you remember, to your point about Wonder Boy, he looks so much bigger than Gilbert Burns, who was able to get inside and get those takedowns. It'd be fascinating to see if Muhammad could do the same. A couple fights that just absolutely fascinate me, Lou, and I got to get your take on them. Cub Swanson against the damaged Darren Elkins. I don't know that this is, going to be a aesthetically pretty fight from a technical standpoint. It feels like a brawler's delight. What do you make of this here with Cub right now? Pretty heavy favorite here at minus 190.
Yeah, maybe a little bit too heavy. I mean, the key with Elkins is if you sneeze on him, it causes a 5-inch cut, and he's going to bleed. In fact, he was probably bleeding 2 weeks ago in the gym because he's just got scar tissue everywhere. To me, this is going to be a tale of 2 fights. The first half of the fight, I think you're going to see Swanson maintaining distance, looking good, and showing himself to be the quicker, more precise fighter than Elkins. Second half of the fight, I think Elkins begins to grind, gets his way close to Cub, who isn't a notorious high cardio guy. And the second half of the fight, I think Elkins gets a hold of him, gets around him, gets him to the floor, and starts to take advantage late.
You know what I love about this fight too, Lou? Combined age, 75 years. So to me, let those old guys go out there and show that they can still hang with some of these young bucks. Going to be a fun fight to watch. Hey, Lou, always appreciate the time and the information. Again, follow him on Twitter at Gamblu and check out his podcast, the BOUT Business Podcast. Lou, we'll catch up with you again next week.
Thanks, Dave. Good luck, everybody.
All right, should be a great fight card. When we come back, going to catch up with Jordan Sherwood to break down everything at UFC Apex. Come on back. It's First Strike right here in VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Back here on First Strike on VSiN. I am Dave Ross. Should be a great card tomorrow night, UFC Apex, as we get Derrick Lewis against Chris Daukaus as the main event. Always love having Jordan Sherwood join the program here, ESPN Chicago. Follow him on Twitter as I do at Woodon1063. Jordan, boy, we exhale. Whew, what a wild week we had a week ago. But this card, again, I've been saying it all day. It just feels like it's sneaky good here. Let's get to one fight here that is interesting to me, and that's, of course, Raquel Pennington against Macy Chiasson at 145 pounds. But this fight won't be fought by both women at 145 pounds because Macy did miss weight here. She was over the limit by 2.5 pounds. What do you make of this matchup here? And Raquel still the big favorite here at minus 190.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because Macy Chiasson, obviously didn't take the fight with Aspen Ladd when Aspen Ladd missed her weight, contracted weight a couple of weeks back. But she steps up on short notice, sure. She doesn't miss the weight, but I think it's main value coming in on Raquel Pennington. I mean, she's 3-1 in her last 4 fights, obviously fought for the title a couple of years ago. A lot of people know her. But I like Macy Chiasson on this fight. I think that, again, Raquel Pennington, notoriously a slow starter, is going to have to work the clinch, maybe get a takedown or two to get her hand raised. And I think Macy Chiasson is just going to be too active, too light on her feet, good takedown defense, and outwork Raquel Pennington. So despite the weight miss, despite the fact that it's short notice. I like Macy Chiasson in this fight. I actually liked her against Aspen Ladd a couple of weeks ago when Aspen Ladd couldn't make the weight. So, to me, Macy Chiasson as an underdog, because Raquel Pennington just doesn't put her foot.
No question about that, Jordan. Again, when I look at
2 rounds out of 3.
Yeah, Jordan, when I look at the total rounds here too as well, juiced heavily to the over at minus 290. And when you mentioned Macy outworking Raquel Pennington, do you think this goes to an overscript here in this 3-round fight?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I don't see either women finishing this fight. I think both these women like to go to the judges' book. If that's the case, and you think it's going to be an over, like, why aren't you going to be putting money down on the more active fighter? That's Macy Chiasson.
Yeah, and plus 250 here if you think Chiasson's going to win that decision. So even though she's already getting plus money, you can really even cash in bigger if you think she will get a 3-round decision victory over Raquel Pennington. Let's talk about Jordan Leavitt taking on Matt Sales in this one. Basically, pretty even fight here with Leavitt right now, minus 115, Sales at minus 105. What do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I just think Jordan Leavitt's going to go back to what we know about him. That's his wrestling. That's his grappling. Matt Sales has not fought in 2 years, and although he'll be a better striker, better on the feet than Jordan Leavitt, I'm going to ignore Jordan Leavitt's last fight, which I think was a dud. I think that this guy is actually a big-time performer. He's going to get the fight to the ground, outwork Matt Sales. So in a similar kind of style that I think Macy Chiasson will outwork Raquel Pennington on the feet, I think Jordan Leavitt's going to outwork Matt Sales on the ground. So give me him as a virtual pick-up. I think Jordan Leavitt should actually be a more like minus 175, minus 180 favorite in this one. So at pick-em, I'm going to take him, lay that money down, and expect him to get his hand raised on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, Jordan, maybe have listened to your handicap here because the money has come in on Leavitt here. He's now minus 125. Matt Sales now plus 105. But to your point earlier in the week, that was about a pick-em fight, but the money coming in on Jordan. Let's talk about Cub Swanson against Darren Elkins. I mean, I don't know how a fight fan doesn't love this matchup here. 2 old veterans, 38 against a 37-year-old. Elkins the baby in this one here. We know that Cub minus 200 against the damage, getting plus 170 here in the comeback. I don't know. You could get finished early, or both these guys could be walking zombies and somehow get to the finish. How do you see this fight breaking down?
Yeah, but just, that's the thing. Like, I never see Darren Elkins getting finished. Like, the dude has damage tattooed on his chest because he takes a lot of damage and then gets the win. Look, Cub Swanson's a great fighter. He's been a great fighter for years. But I just think Darren Elkins is a recipe for disaster. To outwork him, survive early, and grind out a decision like he's done so many times before, like he's done so many times as an underdog before. So at plus 165, plus 175, I'm going to buy the fact that Cub Swanson is knocked out. He's not going to get a quick TKO. Darren Elkins is going to survive that round, that first round, and then outwork Cub Swanson with his grappling, with his wrestling, to get his hand raised. So I like Darren Elkins as the underdog, like he always is. There's value for me, in my opinion, in that regard. So play him again as the underdog tomorrow night.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm on the same side of your handicap here, Jordan, because, again, we've seen this fight script play out so many times with the damage. To your point, if you like Cub and you really think he can get it done, TKO, KO, or DQ is plus 250 if you want to try to find that value in Cub. But to me, that's the game script, or the fight script here. It's Cub early, and if he doesn't get him early, we've just seen it time and time again, the walking zombie that is the damage, somehow come back and get this victory. I'm right there with you. I actually played the over as well and taking the underdog outright to win this matchup. So I'm right there with you. Let's talk about Harry Hunsucker. Hunsucker right now is plus 260 against Justin Tafa, who the heavyweight here missing weight by 1 pound at minus 335 here. So you got big boys in here. Well, certainly one much bigger than the other. Almost a 30-pound weight discrepancy here. How do you handicap this one, Jordan?
First off, I don't understand what happened. I don't understand how Justin Tafa makes UFC history by becoming the first heavyweight ever to miss weight at 267, doesn't get it at 266. But here's what I know. I don't think Henry Hunsucker is a UFC fighter. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He didn't earn a contract on Dana White's Contender Series. He had to take a fight, even though he lost. So I think Justin Tafa, too athletic, too powerful, clearly the play. But I'm not laying 335 on Tafa because he's 1-2 in the UFC. He missed weight. Just give me Tafa under a round and a half. Just believing that Henry Hunsaker he's just not good enough to be in the UFC, and Tafa's going to land one of his bombs. So I like a prop, Tafa in the first round at plus 120, and then the under I think is also plus money, plus 110. But it's heavyweights. You never know what's going to happen. The Tafa's the better fighter. He's going to land some overhand right and put Henry Hunsaker out at some point in the fight.
Yeah, it's so funny because, again, we have Nick Kalikas on at the top of the show. They set these numbers for a reason, and they're right there with you, Jordan, in their handicap here. If you like Tafa by KO, TKO, or DQ, it's only minus 200, right? So Tafa, even though big favorite here at minus 335, you can see that they feel like this is a liability spot here, to your point, where it looks like Tafa has just got more of a pedigreed fighter against a guy, maybe arguably, to your point, that doesn't deserve to be in this organization. So again, you're really trying to find better value. They're giving you slightly better value at the under, still weighed heavily to it at minus 195. And again, to that KO, TKO, DQ scenario at minus 200 if you don't want to lay the big price tag of minus 335. Look, whenever you get Derrick Lewis in a main event, people are going to watch, right? We've seen him be completely outclassed, and it just takes a haymaker, and Derrick Lewis gets his arm raised in victory. He normally has very entertaining post-fight commentary after his victories. Taking on Chris Daukaus here. Now, Daukaus is, we kind of feel like, the new breed, the up-and-coming heavyweight here. Again, giving up about 30 pounds in that octagon tomorrow night. He is the favorite at minus 145. Any danger for Daukaus? Obviously, there's danger with the right hand of Derrick Lewis.
Oh, absolutely there's danger. And I actually think the odds should be flipped. I still think Derrick Lewis should be the favorite. We're not really sure yet on Chris Daukaus what type of level he is. But Derrick Lewis seemingly always is cashed before as the underdog. I was big on him against Curtis Blades. He won that fight, but I was wrong on him when he fought Cyril Gane. I don't think you can lay on either fighter because of the just heavyweights and what the guys can do. I like the under at 2.5. I think that's the safe play because I do believe that Chris Daukaus eventually is going to look to take this fight to the ground. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. No one talks about it. But if he gets this fight to the ground, and Derrick Lewis does have very good takedown defense, but he's not good off of his back. If he gets the fight to the ground, does Daukaus, I see him winning it easily. So I'll lay on my comfort level someone getting a finish at 2.5. If I have to make a pick, I'll pick Daukaus because he's the young up-and-comer. Not confident about it. Think either guy can finish it, so I'll take under 2.5. I think it's $1.75. You got to lay for that.
Okay, Jordan, to your point, sub for Daukaus, 12-1. 12-1. You got to sprinkle a little bit on that if you can get this fight down to the ground, because you're right, nobody's talking about that scenario.
Yeah, and look, you haven't seen Daukaus do it. You haven't seen him do it, but what I know about him is that he's an outstanding jiu-jitsu practitioner at his gym. And look, Derrick Lewis has been submitted before. So, yeah, it's a lot to play because Derrick Lewis has good takedown defense. Daukaus was knocking people out. But why not? 12-1. Didn't know that was the current odds. I like it. So maybe I'll throw a couple of coin on that to buy into that under at 2.5.
You just raised my eyebrows, that's for sure, Jordan. Okay, you got to follow him on Twitter as I do, at Woodon1063. Jordan, appreciate the time and the information. We'll catch up with you again next week. When we come back here on First Strike, right, Reed Kuhn's going to be here with his analytical models to break down this fight card. Come on back. It's First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Talking all things UFC Fight Night. Lewis against Daukaus right here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. I am Dave Ross. Always a pleasure to have Reed Kuhn join us each and every week right here. I love the analytical models that Reed brings to the formula here as we try to find you winners on this Fight Night. Reed, great to have you back. And I know you have a new setup today. Let's see if we get some interesting picks here, because I look at the main event. I look at Derrick Lewis against Chris Daukaus here, and at first blush, you go, I understand why Daukaus is the favorite. But then you look at the level of competition. I know that your models do that, take that into account. And you know there's no way he can match what Derrick Lewis and the people he's been in that octagon with. What are the models showing you here as possibly a live dog here in Derrick Lewis?
Yeah, I think he is a live dog. I think he's a live dog in every fight he's ever fought, which is why we look at numbers and we say he shouldn't have a chance, and yet somehow he wins. This is a case where I think I agree with the betting line, so much so that it's unlikely I'll have a material bet on this one. If there's a lean, it's with Daukaus. And you're right. I think the numbers are skewed because of the strength of competition. His actual numbers right now look phenomenal. Just a handful of fights, not even that many minutes, only 14 minutes of octagon time. He's knocked people down 6 times during that time. He has the black belt in BJJ, hasn't used it, hasn't landed a single takedown in the UFC. And so, yeah, this is kind of a weird one. I'm still uncomfortable running someone through a model who only has a few minutes of data. He's never been to the cards. He had a few fast finishes, just not a lot to work with. And when we do look at the numbers, they're outstanding. But do I believe that? Derrick Lewis has faced a lot of outstanding strikers, and he's weathered the storm and then ended up finishing them. And if I were to believe the numbers, it says Daukaus should run away with it and pick them apart. But based on the lines, based on the threat, the one-punch threat that Derrick Lewis has, and he's one of those guys in the business that absolutely has that one-punch threat, you got to factor that in. And so his threat is going to keep the odds tight. I don't see any line like running away. And I would agree with Daukaus as a favorite. I'm just not going to lay a lot on that. I think if he can survive that first round, of course, the further you go into a fight, the more you're going to fade Lewis. He does eventually succumb to damage if he can't get it done early.
Yeah, no question.
I'm hoping that Daukaus does get a late finish and weather that storm, maybe even an early finish. I don't care. But I'm still not going to bet my night on it. My night will definitely be decided earlier in the card.
There you go, because you're going to find some better value. Again, obviously, the eyes gravitate to the main event, but Reed, you do a great job of finding some of the lesser-known fights maybe on the card to find that true value there. But I do want to go right down the line here because I am intrigued by this Wonderboy Thompson matchup against, remember the name, Belal Muhammad here. You do feel like this is kickboxer striker with the length advantage that Wonderboy has against the guy that wants to wrestle and use that Gilbert Burns takedown policy here to try to maybe grind out a victory. What do you make of the number here at -220, and what are the models showing you?
Yeah, you're right. This is going to boil down to a striker versus grappler. Look at Wonderboy's stats. He is exceptional on his feet. He is accurate. He outworks people. He is kind of a riddle to figure out and actually engage. And he has 10 career knockdowns in his UFC career. On the other hand, his ground stats are almost equally notable because of how horrible they are. There's just not a whole lot of offense there. He is playing defense when he fights, and that has maybe prevented him from winning at all, because is he one of the most gifted strikers in that division? You could make that case. He's a great rangy striker, but if you don't have that ground game, that means you're always worried about your opponent getting close. And Belal Muhammad does have an overwhelming ground game. He has been on control 86% of the time. He attempts takedowns at above normal rate. And even if he doesn't get it the first time, he'll try to drag you down the next time. So I don't think he wants any parts of Stephen Thompson on the feet. Belal Muhammad has been knocked down his own 6 times himself. He's never actually scored a knockdown. That is an extreme opposite ratio of what we're seeing with Thompson in terms of being so good at knocking other people down. Muhammad is the opposite. He is fish in a barrel if he gets caught in open water, I think, with Thompson. But he is going to close the distance. He has good clinch control, drag people down at plus 200-ish. I see value on Muhammad here. I'm hoping he drags this down and turns it into a grinder of a fight. I think we have a lot of tape on Thompson at this point. You shouldn't be walking in and getting surprised that he's got pretty good takedown defense. You have to find ways to get past that and close the distance. So I'm taking a flyer on the pretty big underdog here with Belal Muhammad and hoping he grinds it.
Reed, you probably know this by now, but I always feel better when my intuition matches your models. I'm right there with you. I think we got a live dog scenario here in Belal Muhammad. Let's talk about Amanda Lemus here taking on Angela Hill. We understand why Lemus is such a overwhelming favorite in this one. But again, you look at Angela Hill, and sometimes when the odds are against her is when she shines the brightest. The model's saying anything here about the underdog?
Not much. You're right. Like Amanda Lemos on paper looks outstanding. Mm-hmm. This is another one where we don't have a ton of data, kind of like Daukaus. Only 31 minutes. And so far, 4 knockdowns to date in very short period of time, unusual at strawweight. Very accurate hands, 52% accuracy. I mean, I think last week we were shining a spotlight on Sugar Sean O'Malley's accuracy. This is up there with that. Now, again, both of those have small sample sizes. I expect some regression to the mean later in life. But right now, anyway, she is looking awesome on paper, and she has the superior ground metrics against Hill. So I don't know. Like, I'm seeing clean sweep. So I would have to believe that there's some hidden gem in here, or that she was just fighting cans to date. I don't know if I believe that. I think Lemos is probably going to be thrown in a lot of parlays. I think we could be seeing someone who's a force to be reckoned with.
I got to tell you, too, Reed, going back to last week, I was with you on the Sugar Show as well, and I'm with you on Lemos. Even though as a big favorite, you don't like to lay it, maybe you do find a dance partner here in a parlay scenario, because I'm right there with you. It just feels like that is the correct side to be on in that fight. I wonder about Rafael Sunsao here against Ricky Simon, because, again, Sunsao, a big underdog here, but, boy, I'm sure your models prove it. He's been in with the biggest and the best in his weight classes here. What do you make of this matchup, and is this a live dog scenario as well?
So a few years ago, I would have been one of those guys saying Sunsao is a live fighter in any fight he fights, and he was going against the best in the business. Long career, 264 octagon minutes in his career. When you think about, this guy has literally spent hours fighting in the UFC cage. But Ricky Simon is not. He's not green by any stretch. I mean, this guy has had some big fights. He has 100 minutes of cage time. He's bigger. He's longer. He is 10 years younger. That is a huge number where I come from. And some of his performance metrics actually look superior, especially on the wrestling side. Did not expect to see that. Sunsao is a competent wrestler. It just hasn't panned out that way in the numbers. So unfortunately, Sunsao is a guy that I thought was high potential and maybe could go as far as a title shot at one point in his career. At 39, several bad knockouts. He's taken some time off from the cage. I just don't see it. And agnostic of all of that, the numbers are picking Ricky Simon with a pretty high margin. So this is a situation where I'm probably willing to even lay the juice here.
And that's why I love having you on the program, because, again, when I think, oh, a Sunsao, live dog here, you're right. It is. When you look at 39-29 and a guy on the rise versus a guy maybe on the back nine, certainly if he's not on 16 already in the back nine of his UFC career, I think that's a very astute breakdown, and your numbers bear it out. Let's talk about Diego Ferreira taking on Matsus Gamrot here. Gamrot is the big favorite in this one here against Ferreira. How do the models forecast this one?
This is one of those, the models love a wrestler. And Gamrot is one of these guys who just does relentlessly repetitive takedown attempts. Doesn't get it on the first, the second. He's going to get you on the third. He's attempting more than one takedown per minute of standing. So basically, as soon as these two guys face off in the middle of the cage, start looking for that first shot. And if he doesn't get it, he's going to do it again. Now, Ferreira, competent in most places. He's a decent striker. He's a high-paced striker. I think that's maybe a red flag against a wrestler. Someone who's willing to throw a lot of combinations and extend themselves and push forward. I think they're opening themselves up. And the takedown defense for Ferreira is average-ish, maybe. So I think eventually he gets put down on the mat. Now, this is one where actually it's so recent, we haven't even run the model on it. So maybe look for more revealing insight later in the day or tomorrow. But right now I'm leaning Gamrot, and it's going to be no surprise when he goes for those early takedowns. Got
about 30 seconds left to read. Very quickly, Cub Swanson, Darren the Damage Elkins. What are the models showing you there, and what should be a firefight?
Yeah, it's going to be a high-paced striking match, but I think Swanson is the better striker. He's much more accurate than Elkins and even has better defense, but Elkins is great at grinding people down. He spends the majority of every round in the clinch or on the ground, and when he's there, he is owning people, and he's very good at that control. So I am actually hoping for an upset here. It's not a huge upset with Elkins, maybe plus 150, 160, 170. But I like Elkins here for a grinder of another upset. I mean, that's.
Thank you very much, Reed. Gotta run. Thanks for watching First Strike right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.